The Lorenzo and Pamela Galli Medical Research Trust is an exemplar of the transformative power of philanthropy. Established in 2017, the Lorenzo and Pamela Galli Medical Research Trust supports collaborative research programs across the Parkville Medical Precinct in the areas of cancer and developmental disorders, and enables a unique partnership between the University of Melbourne, the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, the WEHI and the Royal Children's Hospital. The uniqueness of the Trust is that it provides significant and long-term funding to key programs of research, enabling these teams to innovate and explore avenues of inquiry that would not otherwise receive funding through traditional funding models. The outcome of this reliable and sustained funding for cancer and developmental disorders will be profound. It will enable discoveries that will change the way we diagnose, manage and treat these conditions. It will vastly improve the lives of those affected by cancer and developmental disorders and their families. And it will enable these research teams to expedite research outcomes in a way they would not have had the opportunity to do.
The problem we are trying to solve is cancer. So there's no doubt that in recent times we've made huge advances in treating cancer, but it still is the #1 biggest killer in our society, causes huge burden of disease and impact on families and of course the individuals that have cancer. We want to turn that around, reduce that burden of disease, create more cures. And the way we're doing this is taking the complexity that is a cancer and dissecting it using modern techniques of cell analysis, molecular analysis, and brilliant mathematically orientated minds to take the complexity of cancer and turn it into new discoveries that we can use to help patients.
So I'm a developmental biologist by training, trying to understand how the earliest cells of the embryo decide what they're going to be when they develop. During this time I noticed that many of the pathways and principles that we were studying were also implicated in a cancer context, but no one seemed to be looking at cancer from this perspective. So my research now uses this knowledge of how embryos grow in a controlled manner to learn about how cancers can arise and develop in an uncontrolled way. Because of the long-term nature of the fundamental research questions we're investigating, this type of discovery research is quite hard to fund using government grant schemes. And so we rely heavily on philanthropic donations to be able to do these long-term visionary projects.
The Lorenzo and Pamela Galli Medical Research Trust allow us to recruit the brightest minds from around the world with total focus to make that big difference to patients with cancer, the biggest killer in our society.
Research into children with neurodevelopmental disorders has been a neglected area for many years, but with philanthropic support we can now see that there's the opportunity to make substantial improvements in the lives of these children with real-world implications. All of this work requires long-term and sustained funding, which is exactly what has been provided by the Lorenzo and Pamela Galli Medical Research Trust. It's enabled us to employ a number of early career researchers who will be the next generation of researchers in disability. It's enabled us to collaborate more widely, and it has enabled us to develop new treatments for neurodevelopmental disabilities.
We have a really good genetic understanding of forms of intellectual disability, but we really lack a functional understanding. So how these genes affect neurons developing and functioning. And you need to have that understanding in order to develop treatment strategies. Knowing the genetics isn't enough. As a Galli Senior Research Fellow, my team is able to conduct crucial research by modelling patient-specific genetic mutations that arise in patients with intellectual disability. So this research will lay the foundations for trialling treatment strategies that we find effective in children with intellectual disabilities. And David, as a clinician, works closely with patients with intellectual disabilities. So having this close interaction really gives context to the direct impact my research is having.
The task that we're trying to achieve is extremely ambitious and challenging, and it cannot be done in a short time frame. Sustained philanthropic funding really enables us to tackle some of these big questions, some of these questions where we might not solve the problem in 2 or 3 years, but may solve it in 5 years or 10 years. The end result will be transformational for these children.
One of the most exciting things about this research program is that it's exploring a topic that I think people think is impossible. Because it's genetic, things can't be done. We think that is a really pessimistic view. If we understand the biochemistry, intervene earlier, that we can, in many cases, allow the children to develop normally.
Tatton-Brown-Raman syndrome is a rare and not very well understood disease, where patients have a range of neurodevelopmental difficulties, including mild to severe intellectual disability. My work is seeking to make models that we can use in the lab in order to trial different treatments that may support the early cognitive development of these patients and to improve their neurodevelopmental outcomes. It's quite unique to be able to focus on a disease that's quite rare and affects only a small number of people. Now, with philanthropic support, I'm able to use my background in basic science to develop specific models of neurodevelopmental disorders. Ultimately, we're telling patients and their families that we see them, that we hear them, and that we recognise that there's more work to be done. We hope that our research could mean that these patients could have as fully integrated experience of childhood as possible.
So the trust support is really unusual in medical research. And so those two values of patience and collaboration have really shaped the way the projects supported by the Trust have operated. I like to think that as patient philanthropy. If you're tackling a difficult problem, you need to do it for 20 years. And that means if you've got senior researchers, they're not going to be there at the end. So to make a difference, it needs to be a transgenerational collaboration. So you have to pay as much attention to getting the best undergraduate students and PhD students and supporting early career researchers and new faculty members as you do resourcing the last part of a senior researcher's career. I think that is a secret ingredient. And because the Trust was so keen to support 3 institutions and their collaboration with the University of Melbourne, WeHi, Peter Mac, the Children's Hospital, with Melbourne Uni as the centrepiece, I think that has also triggered conversations between researchers who may never have got together. They can see the productivity that comes from that. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel for making a difference in patients' lives.